Okay, so, the stuff you sent over this time, it's all about, like, focusing better, right? Getting more done. And this idea of deep work keeps popping up everywhere,
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
for sure. There's even this quote, I think it was from Eric Barker, a business writer. He calls deep work the superpower of the 21st century.
Mm.
Pretty catchy,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that definitely grabs your attention.
Right. And a lot of this talk about deep work, it seems to come back to this book. Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World by Cal Newport. Have you heard of it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Newport's book is kind of a foundational text in this whole deep work movement.
Definitely. And it seems like he's really trying to do two things in the book. Like, first, convince you that, being able to do deep work, it's really valuable,
Yeah.
especially these days. And then second, he actually gives you like a roadmap, practical steps to actually make it happen.
Exactly. He doesn't just tell you it's important, he shows you how to do it.
Right, exactly. And, it's interesting because Brian Johnson, who does all that work on optimizing life, he mentioned that he read Deep Work super fast. Like, he just flew through it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he found it really inspiring. Like, he even saw it as a guide to getting into that flow state, the one Stephen Kotler talks about, and for developing talent,
Uh-huh.
which, like, connects to Dan Coyle's work, too.
It's all kind of intertwined, isn't it?
Totally. So, I think our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to dive deep, no pun intended, into Newport's book, pull out those core principles, the actionable stuff, so you listening can figure out, okay, how do I actually get better at focusing? How do I actually cultivate deep work?
Sounds good to me. Let's get into it.
All right, so first things first, what exactly is deep work? Like, how does Newport define it?
Okay, so according to Newport, deep work is, and I'm quoting here, professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot to unpack.
Right. But he goes on, these efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate.
Okay, so there are a few key things in there, like distraction-free concentration, that seems huge, and pushing your cognitive capabilities, like really stretching yourself mentally.
Yeah, it's not just about like going through the motions, it's about being fully engaged mentally.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he contrasts this with what he calls shallow work.
Right. Right. Shallow work, he says, is like non-cognitively demanding logistical style tasks, often performed while distracted.
So like what? Answering emails, scheduling meetings, that sort of thing.
Exactly. The stuff that keeps us busy but doesn't necessarily move the needle.
Oh man, that hits home. I can spend hours just clearing my inbox and feel super productive. But then I'm like, wait, what did I actually achieve?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in that busy work.
It is. So I guess the question for all of us is how much of our time are we actually spending on deep work versus shallow work?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. Okay, so Newport doesn't just tell us what deep work is, right? He also gets into the science behind it. And he talks about this thing called myelin, which, Dan Coyle also talks about in the Talent Code.
Oh, yeah. Myelin is super important. It's basically like, think of the circuits in your brain as like pathways, right? The ones responsible for your skills. And myelin is like a fatty coating that insulates those pathways.
Insulation.
Yeah, like insulation on a wire. It helps the signals travel faster and more efficiently.
Interesting.
So when you focus intensely on a skill, you're firing those specific brain circuits over and over. And this repeated firing, it tells certain brain cells to start adding more myelin to those neurons. And the thicker the myelin gets, the better that circuit performs.
So it's like a workout for your brain. The more you focus, the stronger those connections
Well,
get.
exactly. Like Coyle says, to be great at something is to be well myelinated.
I love that. So
Yeah.
when we're doing deep work, when we're in that state of intense focus, we're actually physically strengthening the neural connections related to that skill. That's pretty amazing.
It is, and it explains why deep work is so effective for improving skills and producing high-quality work.
Right. And Newport, he uses the example of LeBron James, the basketball player.
Oh, right, yeah. How he practices his post moves.
Yeah. And the point is, LeBron isn't just messing around. He's not checking his phone or letting his mind wander. He's completely focused on those specific movements over and over. And that kind of intense, focused practice, that's what builds those strong neural connections.
Exactly. It's like he's isolating that specific pathway and strengthening it with every repetition.
Wow, that's a great way to visualize it. Okay, so we're building these strong neural pathways through deep work. But what does that actually get us? Like, what are the real-world benefits?
Well, Newport argues that there are two core abilities that are crucial for success in today's world.
Okay, what are they?
The first is the ability to quickly master hard things.
Right, because things are changing so fast these days, you constantly have to be learning new stuff.
Exactly. And the second ability is the ability to produce at an elite level, both in terms of quality and speed.
So not just doing things well, but doing them well fast.
Yep. That's what sets people apart. And deep work is essential for both of those abilities.
Okay, so how so? Like, how does deep work help us master things quickly and produce high-quality work?
Well, when you're trying to learn something new, something complex, you need that deep focus to really absorb the information, to make those connections in your brain. And when you're trying to produce something great, that same focus allows you to work at your pick, minimize mistakes, and get things done efficiently.
So it's about maximizing the quality of your attention, not just the quantity of time you put in.
Precisely. And that brings us to another important concept from the book, attention residue.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that earlier. What is that exactly?
Okay, so you know how when you switch from one task to another, you don't always fully disengage from that first task?
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like my brain is still half stuck on the last thing I was doing.
Exactly. And research has shown that a part of your attention actually stays with that previous task. That's attention residue.
So even if I'm trying to focus on something new, part of me is still thinking about that email I was writing or whatever.
Yep. And the more intense the first task was, the stronger that residue tends to be, and the more it interferes with your performance on the new task.
So even if I think I'm multitasking, I'm actually not as focused as I could be.
Right. That residue is like a drag on your attention.
That makes so much sense. I've definitely felt that. Like when I try to switch back and forth between projects, I just don't feel as sharp.
Exactly. It's like your mental RAM is full.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, so deep work helps us build those strong neural connections, and it minimizes this attention residue thing. But how do we actually do deep work? Like the book is called Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success. What are those rules?
So Newport lays out 4 main rules for implementing deep work.
Okay, hit me with them.
All right, rule number 1, work deeply.
Work deeply. Okay, I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, right?
It does, but it's more than just like having good intentions. Newport emphasizes the importance of creating routines and rituals that make deep work a regular part of your life.
So like building habits that support deep work.
Exactly. It's about making it a consistent practice, not just something you do every once in a while.
Oh, okay, I like that. What's rule number 2?
Rule number 2 is embrace boredom.
Embrace boredom. Okay, that's a little less intuitive.
It is, right. But Newport's point is that we're so used to constant stimulation these days. Our phones, the internet, it's all designed to keep us entertained and distracted.
So true.
And he argues that this constant distraction is actually making it harder for us to focus for extended periods. We've become addicted to novelty. Every notification, every little bit of new information gives us a little hit of dopamine.
Like a reward.
Exactly. And that makes it harder to stick with things that don't offer that immediate gratification.
Like deep work.
Exactly. So embracing boredom means learning to be comfortable with stillness, with not having that constant stream of stimulation. It's about training your attention span to go the distance.
Wow. That's a big challenge in today's world.
It is, but it's essential if you want to be able to do deep work.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. What's rule number 3?
Rule number 3 is quit social media.
Oh, okay. Straight to the point there.
All right. Newport doesn't mince words on this one.
So he's saying, like, just delete all your accounts.
Well, he acknowledges that social media can have some benefits, connecting with people, staying informed. But he argues that for most people, the costs far outweigh the benefits.
In terms of our attention.
Exactly. Social media is designed to be addictive. It's a constant battle for your attention.
And that attention is what we need for deep work.
Right. So if you're serious about deep work, quitting social media, or at least severely limiting your use, is almost a necessity.
Okay, makes sense. So what's the final rule?
The final rule is drain the shallows.
Drain the shallows. Okay, what does that mean?
It means consciously minimizing the amount of time you spend on shallow work. Those tasks that are easy, that don't require much focus, like answering emails, attending unnecessary meetings, doing mindless paperwork.
The stuff we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Newport suggests things like scheduling your day in advance, being more intentional about how you allocate your time.
So you can protect those blocks of time for deep work.
Right. He even has a formula for high-quality work. Time spent multiplied by intensity of focus. So by draining the shallows, you're freeing up more time for that intense focus.
I like that. Okay, so we've got the 4 rules, but honestly, they all sound kind of, like, difficult.
Well, they do require effort, but that's where routines and rituals come in.
Right. We talked about that earlier. How does that help?
So the idea is that by establishing routines and rituals around your deep work, you reduce the amount of willpower you need to get into that focused state.
So it's not a constant battle against distractions?
Exactly. That becomes more automatic, more habitual.
That makes sense. And Newport talks about different approaches to structuring deep work, right? Different depth philosophies.
He does. He outlines 4 main ones.
Okay, tell me about them.
All right. So the first one is the monastic philosophy.
Monastic.
Yeah. This one is all about eliminating distractions completely. Like, imagine a monk going off to a monastery to focus on prayer and meditation.
So like total isolation.
Pretty much. It's not practical for everyone, obviously.
Right. What are the other ones?
Okay, the second one is bimodal.
Bimodal, right?
This one involves alternating between periods of intense deep work and periods of normal life. So you might have like a week-long retreat where you focus solely on deep work, and then you come back and engage with the world for a while.
So it's like switching back and forth between 2 modes.
Exactly.
Interesting. What's next?
The third one is rhythmic.
Rhythmic, okay.
This is all about establishing a consistent daily rhythm for deep work. So you might block off like an hour or 2 every morning for deep work, no matter what.
So like making it a habit, like brushing your teeth.
Exactly. Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, he famously used this approach for writing jokes. He would write every single day, no excuses.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is, but it's effective.
Yeah.
And the final philosophy is journalistic.
Journalistic, huh?
Yeah, this one is about fitting deep work in whenever you can. So if you have a free hour between meetings, you use that time for deep work.
So it's more flexible.
Exactly. It's about seizing those opportunities for deep work whenever they arise.
Okay, so there are different ways to approach deep work depending on your personality and your work style.
Exactly. It's about finding what works best for you.
Right, right. And, another thing that stood out to me from the book was this idea of focusing on the wildly important.
Oh, yeah, that's a key concept.
And it reminds me of other productivity stuff, like the 4 disciplines of execution. That whole idea of narrowing your focus down to just a few really important goals.
It's the same principle. The more things you try to do at once, the less progress you make on any of them.
So it's about saying no to a lot of things so you can say yes to the really important things.
Exactly. And when you have that really compelling goal, that wildly important thing driving you, it makes it easier to resist those distractions.
Because you know what you're working towards.
Right, you have a purpose. And there's even a quote from David Brooks that Newport uses in the book. He says, "If you want to win the war for attention, don't try to say no to the trivial distractions. Try to say yes to the subject that arouses a terrifying longing, and let the terrifying longing crowd out everything else."
Whoa, okay, that's powerful.
It is.
So we've talked a lot about how to get into deep work, but what about how to get out of it? Like, how do we transition back to normal life without feeling totally fried?
That's where the idea of shutdown complete comes in.
Shutdown complete, okay.
Yeah, Newport argues that it's crucial to completely shut down work at the end of the day.
Like no checking emails after dinner.
Exactly. No emails, no work calls, no thinking about work problems. He emphasizes that giving your brain a true rest is essential for being able to do deep work effectively.
So it's not about being on all the time. It's about working intensely when you're working and then truly disconnecting when you're not.
Precisely. And there's research to back this up. Studies have shown that people who regularly disconnect from work are actually more productive and less stressed.
Makes sense.
Newport even describes his own shutdown ritual. He does a final check of his email, reviews any unfinished tasks, makes a brief plan for the next day, and then he literally says out loud, "Shutdown complete," as he closes his laptop.
I love that.
It's a way of signaling to your brain that it's time to switch gears.
And it's not just about avoiding external distractions, right? It's also about taking breaks from focus itself.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. Even during your deep work sessions, it's good to take occasional breaks to let your mind wander, to recharge.
Like step away from the computer, go for a walk, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Your brain needs those moments of rest to function optimally. It's like athletes who need recovery time after intense training.
Right, that makes sense. So this whole deep life thing, prioritizing deep work, it sounds great in theory, but it also sounds like a lot of work.
It does require effort, for sure. And it's not for everyone. Some people thrive on that constant connectivity, that feeling of busyness.
And there's a certain comfort in that, right? Like you feel like you're always doing something.
Exactly. But the potential reward of deep work is huge. It's about being able to produce your best work, to make a real impact. It's about reaching your full potential.
So it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
You're giving up some of that superficial busyness for something deeper, more meaningful.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so to wrap things up, this deep dive into Cal Newport's deep work has really highlighted how valuable this skill is. In a world that's constantly trying to distract us, being able to focus deeply is like a superpower.
It is, and it's a skill that anyone can develop.
Right. And the key takeaways, they're all about understanding the difference between deep work and shallow work, knowing how our brains work, and how we can use focus to strengthen those neural connections.
Right, and remembering those 4 rules. Work deeply, embrace boredom, quit social media, and drain the shallows.
And then building those routines, focusing on what's truly important, and making sure to shut down completely at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It's a lot to take in, but it's all about making those small, consistent changes that can lead to big results.
One step at a time.
One step at a time. So for you listening, I'd encourage you to think about what's one thing you could do today to start incorporating more deep work into your life. Maybe it's scheduling 30 minutes of uninterrupted time for a project, or maybe it's just turning off your notifications for a few hours. Experiment, see what works for you.
And remember, there are tons of resources out there to help you on this journey. Deep work is a great starting point, but there are so many other books and articles and podcasts that can offer guidance and support, like Newport's other books, So Good They Can't Ignore You, and classics like The Talent Code and The One Thing.
Yes, it's a whole world of knowledge out there, all focused on helping us do our best work and live more fulfilling lives.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.